Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're exploring the eternal psychological battlefield of romantic desire versus the ancient wisdom of Stoic self-control. You know that feeling, right? Have you ever found yourself staring at a read receipt at 1 a.m., wondering why your highly educated, perfectly logical brain has suddenly turned into absolute mush over someone you just met on a dating app? It's a wildly fascinating paradox. Today, we're going to unpack that exact phenomenon. We'll look at the science, the history, and most importantly, the philosophical tools we can use to finally master our own minds. Here is our roadmap for today's explainer, so we can understand how to overcome our worst impulses. We'll cover 1. The reason versus impulse trap, 2. Acrasia and the chase, 3. The psychology of seduction, 4. Attachment and relationship satisfaction, 5. Stoic habits for self-control, and finally, 6. Mastering the mind. Let's get right into it. Section 1. The reason versus impulse trap. We're going to start by examining the internal conflict that defines our most vulnerable human moments. It's a pretty universal question, isn't it? Why do we consistently fall for the wrong people, even when we absolutely know better? Why do our executive functions just completely fail us in the face of romance? Well, modern neuroscience points directly to the prefrontal cortex. That's the area of your brain responsible for goal-directed behavior, long-term planning, and inhibitory control. When we face romantic temptation, a massive rush of neurochemicals, we're talking dopamine and norepinephrine, floods our system. This biological tidal wave literally hijacks your logic center. Suddenly, there's this fierce tug-of-war happening between your rational command center telling you to take things slow and your deeply ingrained biological impulses screaming for immediate connection. Now, thousands of years before we could scan the brain or measure dopamine levels, the ancient Greeks, Aristotle in particular, actually identified this exact psychological failure. He called it acrasia. Basically, it's the state of acting against your own better judgment. It's when you know exactly what's good for you, like walking away from a toxic hot and cold dynamic, but you do the exact opposite anyway. It's a fundamental failure of self-control. You see, knowing better simply isn't enough, because logic operates slowly while impulse operates at lightning speed. So this internal struggle is perfectly represented by a clash of two operating systems. Your rational mind is stable. It utilizes that prefrontal cortex to pursue long-term well-being, peace, and compatibility. But your impulsive mind, it seeks immediate gratification. It doesn't care at all about the long-term emotional fallout. It's the part of you that decides to double-text someone you know is terrible for you at 2 in the morning. That impulsive side is what makes us incredibly vulnerable to the intoxicating highs and crushing lows of romantic pursuit. Which brings us to Section 2, Acrasia and the chase. Let's see how this internal vulnerability plays out in the real world. Historically, this impulse was formalized in the medieval European concept of courtly love. This ideal glorified furtive, sometimes illicit romance. A knight would perform elaborate, dangerous quests to win an elevated, often unattainable lady. It was the ultimate socially sanctioned chase. Fast forward to today, and psychology tells us that this modern chase is often sustained by anxious and disorganized attachment styles. Individuals who grew up with inconsistent caregiving environments often learn that they have to constantly pursue love to earn it. So, when they meet someone inconsistent, they mistake that intense anxiety for passion. You might think it's butterflies, but your nervous system is actually just stuck in fight or flight mode. People become accustomed and even crave the emotional roller coaster. Tragically, when a partner actually reciprocates and offers stability, they might lose interest entirely, because that familiar, addictive thrill of the chase is just gone. Section 3. The psychology of seduction. If we are biologically and psychologically primed for the chase, how do external forces exploit our acrasia? Robert Greene's extensive analysis of historical seduction gives us some amazing insight here. He reveals specific archetypes that master seducers have used for centuries to bypass our rational defenses. Take the siren, for example, symbolized by water. Think of Cleopatra. She didn't just rely on looks. She lured targets like Julius Caesar and Mark Antony with the promise of infinite adventure, creating an environment of fluid pleasure where they simply forgot their rigid Roman duties. Or consider the coquette, symbolized by a shadow. They masterfully delay satisfaction, alternating between intense warmth and icy coldness. This unpredictability keeps their victim in a constant, thrilling state of anticipation, just desperately chasing validation. These strategies aren't accidental, guys. They are highly evolved behavioral tactics, specifically weaponized to trigger our impulses and completely shut down our prefrontal reason. Section 4. Attachment and relationship satisfaction. So what actually happens to our reasoning when the seduction ends and the real relationship begins? Grounded in empirical research, we see that early childhood bonds deeply shape our adult relationship satisfaction. Studies examining secure, avoidant, and anxious attachment styles reveal a crystal clear pattern. Those who are securely attached naturally report much higher levels of relationship satisfaction. They communicate effectively, and they just don't rely on the manipulative tactics of the chase. Think about your own patterns for a second. Do you tend to withdraw when things get serious, or do you cling tighter? Now, the really good news in the data is that these styles are actually malleable. Adult experiences can shift our attachment styles over time. For instance, an anxiously attached person who dates a remarkably secure, consistent partner can actually heal those anxious tendencies. They develop what's called earned security, slowly rewiring their baseline over time. To understand this satisfaction on an even deeper level, we look at the triangular theory of love. Research suggests that true long-term satisfaction isn't just about your raw, passionate feelings for someone. It actually relies heavily on closing a very specific gap, the distance between how you perceive your partner feels about you and how you ideally want them to feel. Let's make this concrete. If your ideal expectation is a partner who texts you updates every couple of hours to check in, but your reality is a partner who comfortably texts just once a day at dinner, that gap creates profound dissatisfaction. It doesn't mean they don't love you, but that asymmetry triggers a toxic cycle of withdrawing and pursuing, which eventually erodes the relationship. Moving to Section 5, Stoic Habits for Self-Control. It's time to defeat acrosia. With all these biological impulses and psychological traps working against us, how do we pull ourselves back from the emotional chaos? Well, this is where the wisdom of the ancient Stoics is a total game changer. They mastered inner discipline long before the dawn of modern psychology. They offer these 5 daily habits to build self-control like a muscle. First up, morning reflection. Starting the day by preparing your mind and setting intentions so you aren't easily derailed by sudden emotions. Second, purposely engaging in unexpected discomfort, like taking a cold shower or skipping a meal, just to prove to yourself that you can survive without immediate gratification. Third, the dichotomy of control. Focusing your energy strictly on your own actions, not agonizing over whether someone else texts you back. Fourth, an honest, non-judgmental evening review to observe where you gave into impulse that day. And fifth, perhaps the most powerful tool of all, premeditatio malorum, the premedication of evils. This means calmly imagining the worst-case scenario. Imagine the person you are pursuing suddenly ghosts you. Just sit with that feeling. By rehearsing it mentally, you strip the event of its terror. You realize you will survive it, and that completely removes its emotional power over your present actions. Section 6, Mastering the Mind. Let's look at how modern applications of this philosophical toolkit work. When combined with Stoicism, these modern habits act as a psychological thermostat. Researchers often compare emotion regulation to a thermostat monitoring a set point. If you experience a sudden surge of anxiety from the romantic chase, these habits kick in to return you to your baseline. Meditation physically improves the inhibitory control of that prefrontal cortex we talked about earlier. It quite literally strengthens the neural pathways that resist acrosia. Journaling allows us to perform that Stoic evening review on paper. Physical activity regulates our biology, burning off anxious adrenaline. And setting independent goals keeps us anchored in our logical mind, looking confidently toward the future, rather than getting swept away by the transient drama of a volatile romance. This brings us to the climax of our explainer, with Aristotle's incredibly powerful analogy from his Nicomachean Ethics. He says that the intemperate person, the one who simply doesn't know any better, is like a city with bad laws. But the person without self-control, the person suffering from acresia, is like a city with good laws that are simply not enforced. Knowing what is right, knowing that a certain dynamic is unhealthy, knowing that the thrill of the chase is just a biological manipulation, all of that knowledge is utterly useless without the self-control to enforce it. I want to leave you with this final, vital thought to consider before you embark on your next romantic adventure. The tools of reason, stoic resilience, and psychological awareness, they are all available to you. You have the good laws written down. The blueprint for a peaceful, satisfied mind is right in your hands. But ultimately, will you let impulse rule your city, or will reason guide your next pursuit? The choice and the hard work of enforcement is entirely up to you. Thank you for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.